Hello there, everybody, and welcome to Kaiju Connections. It is my segment on the entertainment headquarters where I talk all things big monster cinema, from kaiju to monster movies, and this particular film that we are about to talk about is in that category. And to talk about this film, I have brought along a huge fan of this film and, of course, retro movies, and he's has amazing knowledge and all this kind of stuff. So please welcome Thrashpondo Pons. Welcome.
It is an honor and a privilege, and thank you so much for that ringing endorsement, Kevin.
Anytime. So obviously the film we're here to talk about is a film that I've loved since I was a kid. Like, I remember sitting in like my grandparents' living room watching the television, and they always used to show these kind of movies on a Sunday afternoon. So we used to go up to my grandparents, used to sit, have with dinner, and it was time to chill out, relax, watch a bit of TV in the afternoon. And they always had like an old school 1950s movie or something. And this was one of them that always seemed to, be shown on a Sunday afternoon. And you would think, for young kids, you would think it would be something they wouldn't show because it would be scary. But it is, of course, from 1954, Them. Can you remember the first time you seen them?
I certainly can. I was, let's say, 9 years old, and speaking of grandparents, I was actually at my grandparents' home, and I was actually, they were in the living room. I think my grandfather was watching sports or something stupid like that. But they had a second TV in their bedroom, which they used to let me watch. And I'd put on, there was like one of those, again, it was like a Saturday afternoon matinee situation. It was called Creature Double Feature. And they would show a couple of old horror movies, usually in a theme. And the first one was Them. And I had heard about it, but I'd never actually seen it. And it was just sort of, I fell in love with this movie. And I gotta be, we're talking close to 50 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. So like you see, I am, as you can see, I'm wearing a Godzilla t-shirt. This is the original 1954 Godzilla. So obviously this came out in the exact same year that Godzilla came out, because it
Within
seems
months.
like within months. So it's weird how like in over in Japan and over the United States that two separate film companies had this idea to create a real larger than life science fiction film featuring like creatures or a monster, however you like to picture it. And obviously it was around the time when they were doing like the nuclear bomb testings and all that kind of thing. So there was like a unknown fear about it all, I think, at the time.
Exactly. Well, in Japan, you had the Fortunate Dragon incident, and little exposition here
The
for people not familiar with it. A long range Japanese fishing boat had accidentally entered into an area where the Americans were doing above ground atomic testing.
yeah,
And not only was the crew suffering from radiation burns, the catch actually got to market and was sold, and there was an uproar in Japan. Some
yeah,
some newspapers were calling it the third bombing of Japan, which is
yeah,
why, of course, Godzilla is a sea creature. The funny thing about them is they even mentioned Los Alamos. In the States, the above ground testing, which was still going on at this time. I don't know if any people are familiar with John Wayne's The Conqueror.
yeah,
Yeah, it was filmed not too far away from where this testing was being done. A lot of the cast and crew died of cancer themselves, but again, it was set in this desert, which is why them, of course, is set in the American southwestern desert, which is where again our experiments were
yeah.
continuing to go on at this time,
And I
and
know,
both were
like,
the fears of that.
yeah, I think it was the Lucky Dragon incident as well. The remnants of and the impact that had in Japan was felt full fold, and I know years later, I don't know how many years it took later, but they now actually have the Lucky Dragon's boat, and you can actually go and visit it. It's in a museum.
Wow.
They kept it in storage, and they've kept it like under like surveillance because of radiation. But
Mm.
apparently the radiation is now, after all this time, simmered down to a point where the boat, it can now be now displayed, and it's now part of obviously a history museum over in Japan. Um, but obviously that whole incident was felt full fold around the world, and obviously this year, or should I say the year 2023, was a big year, and it's really re-emphasised how important the nuclear bomb incidents were back then. We've had Oppenheimer, which we know is up for all these big awards, and we also had another film which is in this category, which was Godzilla Minus One, which obviously was a fearful, if not, it's a mixture of originality and a fearful, reimagining of the Godzilla 1954 film, which did fantastically well, and it took the world by storm as well. Godzilla Minus One. So, like you say, back in the 1950s, the atomic bomb era, I guess we could call it. There was this fear out there to the public, so all the imaginative, creative filmmakers decided they wanted to capture on the momentum of it and create science fiction films based on different elements. Because the 1950s was like the super, crazy over the top science fiction,
Mm.
time. And
Definitely.
out and out of all of this, one of the creations is this film, Them 1954. So,
It's actually one of the jump starters. In fact, technically, it predates Godzilla. Now they were probably both being made simultaneously, but I always loved the little factoid that them actually came out first. And again, it's playing on people's fear. We just don't know, or we still don't know 100%, but we at the time we knew surprisingly little about what radiation does. They know
yeah.
it caused random cell growth and increased in speed cell growth, but what that would actually bring was anyone's guess. And filmmakers just ran roughshod because they go, anything we do is not that far fetched, right down to giant insects.
hmm
And of course, them kicked off a sort of renaissance of movies about giant insects or
Yes.
bugs, as it were.
Yes, they did. And obviously, when it came to Godzilla, that created a whole new. Every studio wanted a giant monster movie. Like, they did Gorgo in the UK. Over in Korea, they had Hungary and Pulpazari, I think it's called. It just seemed to just explode. And then throughout the 1950s, you were getting things like The War of the Worlds and so much more. So 1950s was a huge time for science fiction. And let's talk about them. So the director then was Gordon Douglas. The story was written by George Worthington Yates, and it starred James Whitmore, Edmund Gwenn, Joan Welton, and James Arness. And it actually came out on June the 16th, 1954 in New York, and then I think it must have had a general release on June the 18th, 1954. So that's a little bit of them. So do you want to take it away and talk a bit
Oh,
about the
sure.
plot?
Well, one thing I want to say, fascinatingly about Gordon Douglas, I was doing some research on him, and he did shockingly little science fiction. He got his start working in Our Gang. In fact, there's unconfirmed stories he actually got his start as a child actor on in the Our Gang shorts, but he actually directed those. The only other science fiction film I could find of his, if this counts as science fiction, is a film called Skullduggery, which was actually
Oh,
banned in the United States for many years. It stars Burt Reynolds, and I don't want to go too far off topic, but it's a fascinating point. Somewhere in the Pacific Rim, scientists find what they believe are the missing link, and the whole film is about is what is the social ramifications of that? Are these people human? Are they not human? If they are human, what are their rights? If they're not human, what are their rights? And again, it was banned in the United States, so I haven't seen it since I was like 10. But that's the only thing that even approaches science fiction as far as I can find with Gordon Douglas. So to make one science fiction film and have it be them, you gotta hand it to him because it's a great film. And I think what I like most about them is that it works on different levels. The first 20-30 minutes of the movie, even though there's certainly the horror backdrop, it's really police procedural. It's James Whitmore and his cop partner, whose name eludes me for the moment, but they find a missing girl in the desert, and
Yeah.
then they sort of reverse technology. They go back to a vacation trailer, which has been destroyed, and they do a lot of things that you would see in cop shows. Um, there's money still in the trailer, so it wasn't a
Yes.
robbery. It was the walls were torn out, not pushed in, so it wasn't like they weren't hit by a truck or something. All the food's gone, but the
Hmm.
money's still there. Strange, and it's all them trying to piece together what the heck happened, and it leads them on another trail of other shenanigans that are very similar. So again, it's really almost the first reel before you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is a science fiction film.
Hmm.
And I just thought that was very, very slick. And another thing, a lot of people like to make fun of the giant ant caricatures, and I guess there was a huge debate. Um, a lot of people wanted to use stop motion. Oh, and by the way, I've always had a theory that for those of you King Kong fans out there,
Yeah.
in the original King Kong, there was supposed to be a whole scene where when they fall off the log into the pit. There's a bunch of
Yeah.
giant insects in the pit which consume them.
Yeah.
They just couldn't do it. It was going to be too expensive. They storyboarded it, and they later used it in
Yeah.
Peter Jackson's.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always thought the concept came from yeah. Wouldn't it be cool if there were giant insects? But
Hmm.
again, stop motion was too expensive. They were going to use forced perspective real ants, but ants are just too hard to wrangle. So
There's
they went with these
actually
big characters.
I'm sure when you've said that with using real ants, there's actually I don't know if it's on like a remastered DVD or Blu-ray, but they had like not the makings of, but they had like found footage from the making of it, and you actually do see a man handling real ants, and there's like a load of sand on the floor, and there's a seat, and I think it's like a test to see if it would work. So what they did is it's in black and white, and you see sand on the floor, and you see probably a couple of hundred ants just running around the sand, and they play the noise that the ants make
Rika,
in the
Rika, Rika,
movie.
Rika.
Yeah, they played that sound, and that was a test to see how it would look on screen. So obviously they must have chose that it wasn't working.
I mean, I'm sure it was worth a shot, but yeah,
Hmm.
ants. I mean, there were like, for example, as we talked about, this movie inspired other big bug movies, Earth versus the Spider and Tarantula being two of them, and
Hmm.
they actually had tarantula wranglers. Shout out to Mr. Anubis and his fascination with tarantulas.
Absolutely. Well, I've
Um,
been encouraging them to do more with the spiders because I think anyone that's not educated on them or have I don't know if you knew this. I know we're kind of going off topic, but arachnophobia is a big thing and it's another massive fear. And
I have it.
DJ Nubis actually has arachnophobia,
Get out of
but
town.
yes, and him having them spiders is his way of helping him cope and actually get over it. And I found that fact very fascinating when he told me. And it was during our Into the Darkness segment, which is another segment I do, my horror segment, where we were talking about a brand new giant spider film called Sting that's coming out.
Hmm.
So we're talking about that, and then it led into the topic of phobias. and that's when he revealed to me he had arachnophobia.
That's very interesting. That is again, kudos to you, Mr. DJ Anubis. But tarantulas can be wrangled either through hand gestures because they're naturally skittish around humans. So if you know that, you can actually move in such a way as to make them move in a certain way. In Kingdom of Spiders with William Shatner, they used
Hmm.
like little air tubes and blew air on them. Spiders don't like that, so you could wrangle them. The guy who did the Incredible Shrinking Man and Tarantula, or Earth vs. Spider rather, claimed to have the only trained tarantula in Hollywood at that time. Whether or not he actually trained the tarantula or was just a really, really, really competent wrangler is still up to debate. But
Yeah,
you can't wrangle ants; they just go manic panic. They just run all over the place. But
definitely.
speaking of the noise, I got to tell you that sort of they do. That is one of the most iconic horror sounds of cinema history. That's actually the sound that makes. It's up there with the death rays that the
Yeah,
Martians use in War of the
War of the
Worlds.
World.
It stays with you. So even though the animatrons are a little on
Hmm.
the hokey side, it more than makes up for it in the sound and some of the other imagery. As we as the plot unfolds and we actually see the sort of nests of these giant ants, that pit that has all the bones in it, that
Yeah,
really stayed with me when I was a kid. That really, I mean,
yeah.
the imagery in this film, you can get past the hokey special effects. The imagery when the little girl shrieks and starts going
So,
them.
for those that haven't seen them, this is the special effects. So, but you need to remember, this is from the 1950s.
50s, yes.
And because it's from the 1950s, they don't have CGI. They don't have the kind of technology where you have to create these, amazing special effects features of today. So I thought, and don't forget, I seen this when I was like I say, young, and I remember watching this in black and white because it is black and white, but in seeing this and just seeing the giant ant as a child, it was quite intimidating. Even though
Mm,
you've got to remember I was a child at the time, so
exactly.
this image for me is at the time frightening for its time, and you have to respect any filmmaker because it's not easy to come up with ideas of films or create the props to bring your imagination on screen alive. And for its time, I think they were well made for what they did. It's like people, still look at the War of the Worlds fondly for its creativity in science fiction. But people now, when they watch them films, are like, I can see the strings on the top of the UFO. But back in the day, that would have been phenomenal. Look at Godzilla, for example, for today, Suitmation. And now he's fully made out of CGI. So you use the means that you have of the day and of the times.
I've always felt that good storytelling trumps practical effects. If you go into a theater and see a stage play, there's only so much you can do with practical stage effects, but it is a representation of what is going on. So as long as the story is solid enough to keep you going, I can actually forgive poor
Hmm.
special effects.
Yes.
I've seen some very low budget movies with some very, very poor special effects that
Yes.
trump some big blockbusters with state of the
Mm,
art special effects. So to me,
and sometimes
different
it's
story.
not about the effects, it's about the actual story. And if
Precisely.
you've got a good story that's compelling, that brings you in, has amazing characters, then the effects have become the side character to the plot and the story. But this is just Sci-Fi Century, one of our good friends. He's just
Oh,
popping in to say hello. Thank
hello,
you for
sci-fi.
popping in, my friend. Thanks for watching. But yes, so them, like I say, the effects might seem to this today's standard, not up to par. But if you look at, like you've mentioned, some films with some CGI is just not good. It's terrible.
It's awful.
Like back in the day, I remember seeing The Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
Yep.
And they, for the time, were brilliant. But now when I look back at them now, you look at the CGI, especially the last scene in the second one with the Scorpion King.
Yeah. No,
And
I
the
couldn't agree with you more.
CGI version of The Rock. And you're like, oh, really? But anyway, well, we must progress and continue talking about the film. So I'll just read a little bit what I've got up on them.
Please.
So basically, them is one of the first of the 1950 nuclear monster films and the first big bug feature film to use insects as the monsters. A nest of gigantic irradiated ants is discovered in the New Mexico's desert. They quickly become a national threat when it is discovered the two young queen ants and their consorts have escaped to establish the new nests. The national search that follows finally culminates in a battle with them in the concrete spillways and storm drain systems in Los Angeles. So that's what I loved about them. It starts off in the desert. And, it starts off with Sergeant Ben Peterson and his partner, and they're the ones that discover what's going on. And then you think it's going to be like how you have monster films based on like an island, and like you had things like 20,000 leagues beneath the sea and stuff like that, and it was always set on a fictional island or an undiscovered realm or a portal to another world, and it would always take place like somewhere else with these magnificent fantastical creatures
like Skull Island and King Kong, or say.
Yes, but with them, it was set in the real world, it was set in the desert, and then it makes its way to the main city, which was frightening. The prospect of that alone, like if you walk down the street and if you've seen an ant, when you see them follow each other after food or hunting to get, in the way they interact, imagine seeing thousands or if not millions of them in a major city at a quadruple size that they're meant to be. That would be a terrifying thought.
Indeed, it definitely would. And of course, it's the whole Frankenstein conundrum. This isn't some random curse or something that was always around and we just stumbled upon it. It's brought upon by man's inhumanity to man. The atomic tests to create the nuclear bombs is what started this whole thing. We have unleashed a horror onto ourselves, and as you say, it wasn't some random other world. It was the continental United States.
Yes, and again, it's man-made. It's a threat of our own doing. It's man-made. But Sci-Fi Century is also mentioned. They are good movies with a decent story but poor CGI. Outlander is a great example, but them definitely sets the tone for creature feature. I couldn't agree more. And Outlander is a fantastic film. I don't know if you've seen that, Thrash.
I'm actually racking my brains. I know Outland. Outlander.
Yeah, so Outlander is based on where there's a man, he's from outer space, and he crashes down onto Earth, but and he lands over in Norway during the Viking era. Yeah, and the Vikings basically think this alien creature that's hunting him is like a mythical monster from their legends.
Oh.
And it's a really, really good film. It really is. You need to check it out. Me and DJ Nubis did our my top 10 current favourite sci-fi films, and that was one of my suggestions when I did that with him. So yes, Outlander definitely a film to watch. Um,
Will do.
but yes, so like you've mentioned at the beginning of the film, they're in the desert and then they find the girl,
And she's in a
and
comatose state, and they're
yeah,
like
she's in
wandering
the
in the desert, and she's holding the doll. It's a really gripping image. It
yeah.
really stays with you.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing. Like we see with it's like with Godzilla 1954. Like today, people might look at that and go, "Oh, well, it's the CGI, whatever. The suitmation is," but it's the tone of the story and it's the message of the film that is the most important. And I felt in this particular film, the cast were all did a brilliant job of surveying, the fear, the terror of this thing that's been man-made, that they've got to rack the brains around how has this happened, how are we gonna overcome this larger than life threat that is our own doing.
I always thought the doctor, who's the actor's name eludes me for a moment, but the principal hero was sort of a precursor to Doctor Who, because he's always one step ahead of everyone else. He always seems to like know what the best course of action is. But the funniest part is he always stays very, very phlegmatic. Like he can say some of the most, like he always has a comeback. Like they'll say to him, "Well, what's the end game here?" And he'll say in this very like calm, almost Churchill type of voice, he goes, "This may be the end of us all." And he does that through the whole movie. Yet at the same time is piecing it together and coming up with a solution package. And I go, that is the essence of Doctor Who. So I always thought somehow he may have influenced the future Doctor series.
Yeah.
But again,
So
science got us into this, and science gets us out. You know,
absolutely, that's very true. So it just shows there's good and bad in all things
Mhm.
sci-fi.
Definitely, definitely. Oh, and I was talking with Tug about it. Um.
Take care.
Uh, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He's just saying goodbye. He's having to peace out.
Nice meeting you, Mr. Sci-Fi.
Yes, but
Um. Oh,
what were
I was on
you?
the Unapologetic Geek earlier, and he said, and I thought about it, and I go, there's a lot to this. He says that Aliens, the sequel to Aliens, is loosely adapted from them, and I thought about it, and I go, yeah, you might be right with it. It ends with the military guys with the flamethrowers, and you got the screaming little girl, and the final plot twist is that they're trying to save children, and I'm like, I think he really may be onto something.
Well, going back to the scientist,
Mm-hmm.
like you say, he like comes up with the idea, but it basically, I think it's Dr. Medfad. He theorized that the giant ants mutated by radiation from the first atomic bomb test near
Los,
Alamogordo.
yeah, Los Alamos.
Yeah, yeah, or responsible for the area's death, and a helicopter search ensues and the giant ant nest is found. Cyanide gas bombs are tossed inside before Graham, Preston and Pat check for survivors inside. Pat finds evidence that the two queens have hatched and escaped to establish new colonies. A worldwide search is begun. One queen and its offspring are discovered aboard a freighter sailing from Acapulco with no survivors among the crew. The freighter is subsequently sunk by the Navy. So just the idea that imagine that you're sitting in the house and you're watching your local news and you get a worldwide new bulletin and that there's giant atomic ants that are spreading worldwide.
Well, and that's another thing, and something I thought was very, very slick. They actually clamped the story down. They actually hush it up to avoid a panic, which again is something in most science fiction. The first thing they do is quick, let everybody know, always watch the skies, that type of thing. In this, it plays out more like I actually see our government doing it. There's even one scene in a hospital where James Arnez tells a doctor, if you say a word about this, the government is going to hold you personally responsible. And the guy's like, okay, I won't say a word. I won't say a word. And I'm like, it's soft pedaled, but it's basically blackmail. They're really,
Mm.
really, really keen on keeping the story hushed up, which I thought was kind of odd. That's one thing I always did wonder about. If you wanted people to be on the lookout for giant ants, wouldn't the best thing you could possibly do say, "Hey, watch out for giant ants. If you see
Yeah.
one, call this number." But too well in their
I,
reach.
and obviously, I liked as well during the plot of the movie. Obviously, after the discovery of the ants in the desert, and then they realised the Queen's thing. I like the idea of how you had two different stories. Like you had that man who believes that he was abducted by UFO aliens, the giant ant aliens, and like they kind of clearly see that he's a mental patient. And then you have the other one who's in the hospital who looks out and he sees across in Los Angeles the drainage area and he sees the giant ants.
Yes.
So there's like it's like a great way of telling, when people spread false lies to the media and those who are seeking the truth, which is how I looked at certain things.
I can definitely see that. Yeah, the drunk in the hospital, they all attribute it to the DTS, except for the people who know there are giant ants, and that's
Yeah,
what gives it away that it's in that giant. And I can never remember the name of it, but it's this like giant sort of cistern system which drains water away from Los Angeles, and I can remember the name of it.
yeah,
It's been used. It was used in Repo Man. It was used in Grease. It's been used in a bunch of stuff.
yeah,
But I thought that was very slick. And you're right. That was Fess Parker who plays the pilot who thought they were flying saucers. And I always love that too. It's like this isn't a flying saucer movie, but they managed to give a nod to flying saucers. So you take between giant monsters, the other huge sci-fi angle in the 50s was flying saucers, and they managed to work
yeah.
that in as a nod. I thought that was very nicely done.
Yeah, like I say, the 1950s was the time for the over the top crazy science fiction films, and
Definitely.
a lot of
Yep.
them were probably like alien based, like more along that
Generally.
lines. And then obviously, as the it progressed, you did then move more into the monster era with like the Toho films. Um, and then obviously, yeah, you did have like the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, which
Which is the
which was the inspiration, I think, to both them and Godzilla, because I believe Godzilla, once that came out and was a worldwide hit, the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, Toho immediately wanted to get on it. And
yep.
within a few months after that, it was in production. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was also the catalyst and the inspiration to create them.
I'm sure. I'm absolutely certain it was. And it's so funny because the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was inspired by Ray Bradbury's The Foghorn. So this one little short story Ray Bradbury wrote, which is basically it's a comedy. It's basically about a sea monster that thinks a foghorn is another sea monster's mating call and is disappointingly surprised when he realizes that it isn't. And this one little comedic short story basically created an entire subgenre and one of the biggest franchises of science fiction history, of course. Godzilla. It's really just amazing the origins of some things.
Yeah. And after, obviously, the ants have left and now they're in Los Angeles, this is where I think, you see what I think's one of the darker elements of the film is when obviously the discovery of the mutilated body of the father
Mm-hmm.
and the sons are missing. So obviously it was already up to this point for the 1950s quite a eye-catching movie. It also had some scary elements for its time, but I think the idea of having a father be mutilated by a giant ant and his sons go missing, that for me was quite like a dark tone within the movie, but obviously it's already got the hidden messages of the radiation, atomic blasts, and all that, because that's what this is. It's showing you the power and probably the dangers of it by using the ants, like they say within Godzilla 1954. They used a giant sea creature, Godzilla, to pretend the message out there, where this is all about the giant ants, and to add, an even darker element, you're killing a father of two boys.
And there's even that one scene where I think he's just a press agent. I'm not entirely sure, but he's actually trying to find out what the military is going to do. And he goes, "Are they going to use like big weapons?" And they go, "We can't use any type of heavy ordnance because of the lives of the two boys." And this guy very callously says, "You're going to risk the entire city for two boys?" And it's this sort of then there's this like pregnant pause where they're like, "Wow, you just went there." We're already starting to weigh human life against the greater good. It's a really
Mm.
really dark message. Now they played off beautifully. James Arnaz says, "Maybe you want to ask the mother that." And in the background, the mother's there hysterical because her two boys are still missing. And the
Mm-hmm.
guy has a chance of redemption. He goes, "Yeah, okay, I see your point." But it's like the film gets dark in a number of very serious
Yeah,
places, and like,
I think
and
that's
again, that's
why
something
it's. I think because of all the undertone messages, like we've talked about, in like the undertones of like the dark element, I think that's why it's helped them stand the test of time.
definitely.
Because obviously it still gets talked about, and I will talk about something at the end of this stream. But obviously, after the discovery of the boys, they then go to look for them with reinforcements, and that's basically when they discover the ant nest with the queen. And she's, there's now hundreds, now I wouldn't say thousands, hundreds, a thousand, but there's at least a couple of hundred new formed ants in the ant layers there, and they rescue the boys, but unfortunately one of the heroes gets killed.
Yeah, James Whitmore, and it's very similar to Quint in Jaws, where it's almost a self sacrifice. Now he didn't intend to sacrifice himself, but he makes sure the boys are safe, and Sally doesn't give him enough time to save himself. But
Yeah,
I thought James Whitmore's death, Sergeant Peterson, I believe, is actually one of the sadder parts of the whole flick.
yeah, definitely. And then obviously James arrives with the military and takes out the
Flamethrowers.
ant. Yeah, that it's like you see, I can now that it's been mentioned, you can see the inspiration from them in so many other films. You've just mentioned Jaws. I can see that now that you've brought it up. And the flamethrowers within Aliens, I 100% see that. So it's in even the claustrophobicness of when like Ripley and that just moving around inside the big base. It's like moving around like a sewer system. Like it could take it from them as well. You've got the aliens who are like hiding within the walls of the facility on in Aliens the film. You could take that from them as well, because they're trying to maneuver around the sewage system without being caught or discovered by the ants, and they're trying to stay alive and not actually be caught.
Hmm. Definitely, definitely.
Definitely. So we're near the end of the plot.
Hmm.
So then later they find the remnant queen and her hatchlings, which are really, this is like crunch time for the film, basically. Uh, the Medfeds sanction the destruction of the ants and are dispatched via flamethrowers. Now this like just the scenes with the flamethrowers and the ants and just the chirping noises that they make. It's just iconic for me for like monster cinema.
And again, the flamethrower was not a new weapon even in the 1950s, but it's something so horrific Uh, I mean, they were used extensively in World War One and World War Two, and it's my understanding they were used. You usually see them in like the movies. You see them in the open, and there's just some guy going around like blasting them. They were usually used to clear out bunkers, and it's a little on the gross side, but if you'll indulge me, it wasn't so much that if a flame hit you, it would kill you, although that is certainly an element. The fire burned off the oxygen in the bunker, so it would asphyxiate anybody in it, even if you could avoid being hit by the flame. So you're
Mm-hmm.
taking this truly horrific weapon
Mm-hmm.
and using it to kill the ants, which is a good thing. So here you are. It's a whole duality of the military complex. The ants were an unforeseen negative side effect of the creation of the atomic bomb,
Mm-hmm.
and it's coped with by a flamethrower, which is another really truly inhuman weapon. So I'm not saying it's a love letter to the military complex, but it's interesting how the duality there. It's almost like they're using one monster to fight another, almost like Kong
Yeah.
versus Zilla. You
Yeah.
know?
It's like you've got to sacrifice yourself for the greater good. So it's like a, it's like a death mission. Really, it's like it's a mission you're not going to come back from.
Well, true. There's always that, and you
And
see that element. You see that element a lot, and that's a holdover from again the World Wars, where a lot of the missions were not on paper, but everybody knew these were going to be suicide missions, and
mm,
people sacrificed themselves. And again, it's that I don't want to say bravado because bravado would minimalize it, but again, it's that sort
yeah,
of self-sacrifice that um, sort of came out of the first part of the 20th century.
definitely. And then obviously you get, the answer, successfully meet their demise.
Hmm.
And then this is when you get, Pat's father, and he's considering the possibility of the consequences of all the other atomic tests in the 9 years since the events that have transpired. So there's like that question: well, what else is out there, and what else it could have been created from the atomic blasting?
There's a great line in oh, it's the Lawrence Buchanan ripoff of Attack of the Saucermen. Um, but there's two officers, and they're destroying an alien invasion ship, and the senior officer is patting himself on the back, saying, "We've done it. We've saved our planet, and no one need never know of the horrors that have almost transpired." And the guy goes, "It's almost like itching. Once you started stuff to stop." And the commander says, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, just because we solved things here doesn't mean things like this aren't happening all over the world, and everyone else is fighting to stop it. And how long before someone can contain a situation?" And you see that theme a lot in 50s science fiction. It's the plot twist in, speaking of kaiju movies, the one Danish kaiju movie, Reptilicus, where
Yes.
um spoiler alert, one, and they were even warned, they go, "We can't blow the thing up because then the pieces will grow like starfish, because we'll find the pieces and destroy them. That's another problem." And of course, what
Mm-hmm.
happens? They miss a piece, and it does start into another. And so
Mm,
just because you've contained the clear and present danger doesn't mean there aren't other ones in the works somewhere.
definitely. So overall, it was the first big bug or the big,
Hmm.
monster movie of the 1950s outside of Godzilla that I think made quite an impact on me personally.
Hmm.
I still think, despite what people say, it still holds the test of time.
Yes.
If you had to rate them between, you know, 1 to 10, where would you rate it in terms of the films you enjoy?
Overall, because I would have to crunch a lot of uh, context. overall, I would give this film a solid 8, probably an 8.5.
Yeah, I would give it an 8 out of 10. But you've mentioned that you had some. Is there any other fun facts you want to talk about when it comes to the film? Because I know that you're quite knowledgeable with facts around these kind of films. Because you are the man with the retro knowledge. And
I do try. I'm a huge fan of retro cinema. It's so funny because people sometimes, like you just did with Outlander, people ask me what I think of like modern cinema. I don't watch a lot of modern movies. If I have a night free where I can watch a movie, I'll pull one of my old movies out and watch Return of the Living Dead or Repo Man again. I love old cinema. So but so that's again my field of expertise. But one of the things I really loved about this one is the supporting cast. If you look closely, you will spend half
yeah,
the movie going, "Oh look, there's Richard Deacon. Oh look, there's Dub Taylor. Oh look, there's Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy has a walk on." And people think he is a sci-fi icon because of Star Trek. He was
yeah,
doing sci-fi movies before that.
definitely.
Brain Eaters, among others. But he has a walk on where he's a soldier in a radio room, and he's flirting with a radio operator while he's giving her some message she has to broadcast. And um, one of the one I'm gonna get his name wrong. Olin Holland, who
Hmm.
plays Jensen, the drunk who says, "Make me a sergeant, sergeant the
Yes.
booze." Make me. He was in the Blob. He's the old man in the Blob who's the first one who gets eaten. He's the alpha patient.
The
Um,
Blob is another film I enjoy. It's another classic.
it
There's a
certainly
lot
is.
of, and you know what? Like I've got a few facts here. This is very
Oh, cool.
popular culture facts when it comes to them. So the first one, like I say, I'm a big fan of kaiju. Them heavily inspired the 1956 Japanese kaiju film Rodan. It had quite a big impact, and the plot of that, it has a similar feel to them, but obviously Rodan's the giant like pterodactyl, kaiju. He made an appearance in Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019, so he's a very popular character in that series. Now this one's a funny fact. Van Morrison's band Them was named after this film. Through the band member that came up with the name was not Van Morrison but Eric Rickson.
Oh,
So there's a fun fact.
I never
Uh,
knew that.
the video game series, it came from the desert, was inspired by them, and if you look at the cover art you would think it was an alternative cover of them, and it is about giant ants. And I recently just did my trailer reaction for the film for no, the new Amazon Prime series Fallout that's coming, which is based off of the very popular video games. So Fallout 3, which takes place in a post-apocalyptic eradicated wasteland, has a side quest involving giant mutant fire ants titled Those.
Nice little nod there.
Yeah, so it's a homage to the film. And the most recent fact that I know, the scene where Pat is attacked by foraging ants appears as a replay in the 2018 Marvel film Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh, excellent.
So they like take elements in there's a certain scene in it where he gets attacked by these ants, and it's reminiscent of where they're in the sewage system and they're around with the ants.
Hmm.
So so now that we've talked about them, as you know, thanks to Godzilla 1954, sorry, not Godzilla 1954, Godzilla 2014, obviously it's inspired this new wave of monster movies. We've got the Monsterverse that's grown still. There's rumours they're going to announce soon a second season of Monarch Legacy of Monsters. We've got Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire's out in a couple of weeks' time. And there's loads of rumours that a lot of these 1950s properties might be going to be making a slow comeback.
Hmm.
So, of course, one of them would have to be them.
Them. Yeah. You gotta do it.
And this is, you know, how you mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation that the director of them was somebody who wasn't a science fiction director?
Hmm.
Well, this was announced on January the 4th, 2023. It was revealed that Academy Award winning film composer Michael Giacchino would make his feature directorial debut with a remake of Them from Warner Brother Pictures.
No kidding. Huh.
Yes.
How about
So
that?
there is a brand new Them that is currently in development, and it's once again it's directed by a person who isn't an actual film director, but he's an actual film composer. So there's one thing I know: at least the score will be good.
You raise an excellent point.
And there is rumours that the plot he wants the base, obviously back in the 1950s.
You
The
should.
plot,
It gives a certain flavor.
it was based on the atomic blasting, the testing, and the fear of the radiation from that. Apparently, the new one, it's not going to be a direct remake like how Peter Jackson's King Kong was.
Was.
It's going to be a modernized version. So
Huh.
it's going to be set in real time, like our time. And apparently, part of the plot is going to be something to do with immigration. So
Hmm.
obviously you've got the Mexican border crossing to the US. So clearly the plot's going to involve something like that. I
Huh.
just hope I don't mind that idea as long as it's done in a believable and genuine good way. That they do it with they make it realistic and they do it in a respectful way. And of course,
Definitely.
it won't be puppetry. It'll probably be modern CGI.
CGI. You almost have to nowadays. You almost have to.
Yes, let's just hope the effects are good.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, so what's your opinion of the potential remake?
I'm always willing to give a remake or a reboot or a re-envisioning a chance. I think there's always something new you can add, as long as you stay faithful to the source material. For example, I've been watching Shogun, the reboot of Shogun,
Yeah.
and I think in some ways it's better than the original. Although I loved the original when I was a kid, I think in some ways it's better. Um,
I
but a
think with
lot,
the remake, though, because it's been made in the year we're in, they have more ability with a bigger budget to make it more authentic. Like the costuming in Shogun's fantastic, the
yes,
setting's fantastic, the cast is phenomenal.
nominal, yes.
And speaking of Shogun, and as you can see, one of our good friends has arrived, DJ Anubis from the Metal Tavern Radio.
Speak of the devil,
And
what's going on, Mister Nubis?
yes, well, DJ Anubis and me were talking the other day, and when it comes to Shogun, we will be doing a review on my channel, and I would like to ask you if you would like to be a part of that.
I would love to be a part of that. Thank you. Yes,
So the
I would.
three of us can get together and we can talk all things Shogun.
That'd be awesome.
But it's been a pleasure having you on the channel, my friend. It's always good to have great guests with great knowledge of, what we're talking about. And you are the retro king. You know more about retro cinema than me. So it's been fun having you on the channel. Is there anything coming up on your channel that you'd
Yes,
like to talk about?
tonight I do have a live chat at 7:30 p.m. Everyone's welcome. Don't have a specific topic. Basically, it's just all organic. It's a Q&A. Anything people want to talk about. Vintage sci-fi horror preferred, but anything pop culture. In fact, for example, tonight I'm doing a trivia. It's trivia derived from the old TV show Taxi, one of my favorite old
Oh,
comedy TV
Taxi,
shows.
yes.
Yes. So please, Kevin, if you'd like to join, Mr. Nubin, if you'd like to join, and anyone else in the comment section, please come by and see me tonight on my content channel, Thrashpondo
Yes,
Pons,
yes.
7:30 Eastern Standard Time.
You heard it. You you need to like, share, and subscribe to Thrashpondo Pons' amazing channel. He does have some amazing, interesting content, and he has a lot of retro content, and you're very knowledgeable with what you talk about. And you know what?
you.
It's nice to have somebody that can bring the past to the future and make it cool, and that's what you do. So,
You honor me. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was very nicely said. Thanks for the huge props.
no problem. But as for me and the entertainment headquarters, next week I'll be doing a review of Damsel, the new Millie Bobby Brown film that's just dropped on Netflix. It's like a fantasy movie. It looks something similar to The Princess Bride meets Stardust, in my opinion. So I'll be doing a review with that with a handful of individuals. Not quite sure who. Probably Anubis will be there. That's one bit of content. I also will be doing a review of the new disaster movie / shark film called No Way Up. And that is a film, that is a film where there's a plane crashes into the ocean. It's somehow, I don't know how this is possible, but it ends up at the bottom of the ocean. There's an air pocket in the middle of the plane, but obviously they cannot get out, and the plane's being circled by sharks. So I'll be doing a review of that, and me and DJ Anubis this coming Wednesday on his channel will be doing our next entry in the cinematic synergy, and we will be talking about Kill Command, a very good science fiction robot, futuristic movie about this team of soldiers that go on like a training session in this futuristic place, and they're testing against these robots. Well, as you can imagine, it doesn't go well. So that is what's coming up on my channel this week, and with me and DJ Anubis. But this has been Kaiju Connections. This has been Thrashpondo, son. It's been amazing having you on my channel, and I will definitely have you back if you're willing to come back.
Always willing. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun today. Thank you.
But this has been me, this has been him, this has been the entertainment headquarters, this has been Kaiju Connections. And like I always say, keep loving your films, keep on loving your television, keep on loving all things entertainment, and keep the kaiju love alive.